From mastering hidden chemistry to building a bluegill buffet, we are maximizing your pond's carrying capacity in this episode of the Species Spotlight. If you're serious about growing giants, you're in the right place. Let's get to building the ultimate fish factory for your largemouth bass. In our last episode, we broke down why most bass ponds are broken and how to transition from hoping for a trophy to engineering one. Make sure to check out that episode by clicking on the tag in the upper right-hand corner. For real though, if you're really serious about growing some trophy bass in your pond, you're really gonna wanna check that out. This episode focuses on how to maximize the carrying capacity of your pond and how to build a productive fish factory, not only for your bass, but also for your bait fish and any other aquatic organisms for that matter. So let's get started. Now, if you watched the previous episode, you'll know that you want to have a pond with a lot of shoreline and undulating bottom topography. You know, bass associate closely with structure, and most structure is near the shoreline or the littoral area. The more shoreline you have, the better. But even the most perfectly shaped pond is just an empty bowl if the life support system fails. Beneath that surface, there are invisible chemical forces at work that can either supercharge your fish growth or shut it down entirely. Let's look at the hidden chemistry you need to master. For alkalinity, it's important. It's a very important metric to monitor. Get it above 50 parts per million. Alkalinity not only helps improve fish growth and egg production, it also helps prevent drastic swings in pH, which can be very stressful to fish. If the alkalinity is less than 50 parts per million, you can apply lime to increase it. You can either add agricultural lime or liquid lime. Both are great choices with, certain trade-offs. Ag lime is cheaper, but requires some heavy equipment to move it around. Liquid lime is more expensive, but extremely easy to apply. For phosphorus, the amount of vegetation and algae growth is controlled by the amount of phosphorus. If you're constantly battling algae problems, odds are that you have a high concentration of phosphorus. I have a playlist dedicated to aquatic weed control. It's called Pond Weed Problems on my channel. In that series, I go over how to control all types of weeds and algae and how to address the underlying issues. Phosphorus binding agents come in many different forms and are, readily available. I've included an Amazon link in the description of this video. So for a phosphorus binding agent that I've used and had great success with. As an Amazon associate, if you use one of my provided links to purchase something, I do get a small commission. It doesn't cost you more, so it would be greatly appreciated, really. Most binding agents also improve water clarity, which brings us to our next topic, visibility. Bass, along with most other predators, are sight feeders, so having at least 18 to 24 inches of visibility is extremely beneficial. I've seen some giants come out of some chocolate milk pond water, but it's very rare. The reason I say 18 to 24 inches is ideal is because if your pond is too clear, you are more than likely going to have vegetation overgrowth problems since the sunlight can penetrate to greater depths. If your water is too clear, you can apply pond dyes to kind of help control that vegetation density. Clarity is for the eyes, but there's a silent killer that visibility can't show you. It's a ticking time bomb lurking in the deepest, darkest parts of your pond. One that most owners don't even realize is there until it's too late. To save your trophy bass, you have to understand the dead zone. Oxygen is perhaps the most critical water quality parameter of your pond. If your oxygen is low, your growth rates will be low. The more oxygen, the higher the potential there is. There are many other things that could limit productivity, but oxygen is the pillar of that productivity. If you've ever heard the term turnover, you know that it's usually associated with a fish kill or nasty looking water a few days after a turnover. I'm going to tell you how to avoid a harmful turnover event, but before I do that, I'm going to explain why it happens. So most ponds will stratify in the summer, which means the water column has, separated into two different layers. Cooler water is denser, so it's kind of on the bottom, and warmer water is lighter, so it stays up on top. The bottom cooler layer is called the hypolimnion, and the warmer top layer is called the epilimnion. Now, in between those two layers, there's a slice called the thermocline, and it's essentially a cap or a barrier that doesn't allow gas exchange between the two layers. This is an important part. So the epilimnion also consists of the photic zone, where the sunlight can penetrate, allowing photosynthesis to occur, which produces, you got it, oxygen. All right, so we know what's going on top, but what's going on down below? The hypolimnion is the train station where things go to die. Organic matter sinks down to the bottom and decomposes. Bacterial decomposition consumes oxygen if there's even any oxygen available. But if there's not enough oxygen, the byproducts of anaerobic decomposition produce noxious gases such as methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. These gases build up throughout the growing season, creating a ticking time bomb. The hypolimnion is dead water. Fish can't survive very long down there. Now remember, the epilimnion, or top layer, is completely fine and totally unaware of what lies beneath. Everything might seem perfectly fine, but if a big rain shower comes and dumps a bunch of cool water on the surface of your pond, a turnover is bound to happen. When the cool rainwater, mixes with that epilimnion, it could make it cool or dense enough to cause a turnover. The dead noxious gas-ridden, hypolimnetic water mixes with the epilimnion, which could be catastrophic. The severity of a turnover event depends on the actual volume of the dead water. If your pond is, really, really deep compared to its, surface area, you'll probably have, regular harmful turnover events. If your pond is relatively shallow, you might not even have a thermocline. So how can you avoid this from happening in your pond? The simple answer is bottom-diffused aeration. Aeration not only eliminates the chances of a harmful turnover event, it can also double the volume of, livable space in your pond. How so? Well, if properly sized, the diffusers create, an upward current which thoroughly mixes the water column. And this allows fish to thrive in the deeper water, which means they can actually utilize that habitat you threw out in the deepest part of your pond. I see. I know a lot of people that do that. There are many other benefits to proper aeration, but there's just not enough time to really talk about them. The main point I'm trying to get across is that it boosts productivity and maximizes the carrying capacity of your pond, leading to much better growth rates and a healthier aquatic ecosystem. Once you've unlocked that extra livable space with aeration, you set the stage for a massive population boom. But now, a new battle begins, a green takeover that can turn your fish factory into an impenetrable jungle where your bass actually starve in the midst of plenty. Vegetation is a very important thing to have, but it's also important to keep it under control. Rooted aquatic vegetation helps reduce wind and water erosion. It can help maintain water clarity by filtering suspended sediments and dampening wave action that resuspends the bottom sediment. But where there's utility, there's also a threat to the health of your bass. If left unchecked, the vegetation can take over and reduce the feeding efficiency of your bass. It is extremely important to keep the vegetation coverage at or below 30% coverage. Anything more than 30% coverage can hinder the ability of your bass to find and capture prey. As I already mentioned, I have a series or a playlist on my channel called The Pond Weed Problems that you can check out if your pond is dealing with too much vegetation growth. There are a few beneficial plants that are excellent and fishing friendly. American pondweed, American water willow, eelgrass, pickerel weed, rush and sedges, and some lilies. All these can provide benefits, but like I said, only in moderation. We've built a factory, but a factory can't run without fuel. To turn a big bass into a record breaker, you need a relentless supply of high-octane fuel. It's time to meet the prey that makes the predator possible. Okay, your bass need food, obviously. These bait fish are a vital necessity to the growth of your bass. In part 1 of this series, I discussed stocking rates and strategies, so I won't go into that in this episode, so click on the tag in the upper right-hand corner if you want to watch that episode. Bluegill are the main forage item for largemouth bass. They evolve together and complement each other in multiple ways. Red ear sunfish are another food source, but their main contribution is snail control. Red ears eat snails, which are the main vector of many fish parasites. Threadfin shad are a no-brainer. If you have access to them, they are extremely prolific and are very nutritious for the bass. I stock them every spring in most of the ponds that I manage. If you're in the central United States and need some for your pond, hit me up. I might be able to help you out with those. Gizzard shad, they are a welcomed pond inhabitant in most ponds that I manage as well. They often get a bad rap for, outgrowing the gape of a bass, but if you have an established adult bass population, it won't be an issue. If you're looking to stock them, make sure to, wait until the average size of your bass is 3 to 4 pounds. Golden shiners are stocked every fall in all the ponds that I manage. They make an excellent fall and, winter forage item for the bass and, usually last a lot longer than fathead minnows, which fathead minnows do have their place in my repertoire. I always stock them if it's a brand new pond and I'm trying to build up a forage base before stocking the bass. They're not a sustainable species, but they make an extremely easy meal if your fish are coming out of a stressful period. Stocking fingerling rainbow trout in the winter can make the difference between a good bass pond and a trophy bass pond. If your goal is to grow a record-sized bass, you gotta try stocking these next winter. I'd wait until your adult bass are 2 pounds and bigger so that none of the trout, go to waste. The trout will also utilize supplemental fish food, which brings me to my next topic. Stocking the right species is the foundation, but if you wanna push your pond beyond its natural limits to grow fish that shouldn't even be possible in a pond, you have to look at supplementation. Are you ready to see the math behind the muscle? If you're training at the gym with the intention of gaining muscle mass, you'd be crazy not to be taking some type of supplements, right? Or if you're trying to grow some, Boone and Crockett bucks on your ranch, you're probably going to plant some food plots and possibly a few protein feeders, right? Well, the same concept applies to growing trophy bass, or, any trophy fish for that matter. Whether you're putting that, supplemental food directly into the bellies of your bass or indirectly by feeding your bluegills, it can and does have a significant role in achieving your goals of growing some trophies. The benefits of supplemental fish food can easily be seen in the relative weight of your fish within, a few weeks, if given the proper amount. How much is needed? It actually depends on the, quality of the fish food that you're giving your fish. If you're giving them a cheap generic fish food, you'll need to be giving them 5 to 6 pounds per acre per day. Whereas if you're giving them a premium quality fish food like Endurance, they'll need 3 to 4 pounds per acre per day. The conversion rate for Endurance is for every pound of supplemental fish food, every pound one eats, it gains 1.2 pounds. Does that make sense? That's just that good of stuff. For cheap generic foods, the conversion rate ranges between a half pound to a 3/4 of a pound of weight gain per pound of food ingested. If you do the math, it's actually cheaper to buy a premium quality fish food if you're looking at weight gained rather than volume of fish food bought. Now, you might be thinking, what about the nutrients you'd be adding to the pond, Jared? Well, Don't you think by dispensing a bunch of food into my pond, I'll be adding a bunch of nutrients and it'll cause more algae problems? Well, yes and no. If you're using a cheap brand of food, the answer is yes. They use a bunch of different things in their, formulations, not very digestible to fish, which causes a lot of wasted byproducts coming out the other end and ending up in your pond instead of staying in their bodies. On the other hand, premium quality brands such as Endurance go the extra mile and incorporate ingredients into their blend that are easily digested by the fish and allocated to body growth. Their blend also has a low phosphorus concentration, which makes it that much better. I know a lot of people that like to hand throw their fish food, but not a lot of people have that convenience. Also, keeping your feeding times on a defined schedule takes some of the human error and inconsistency out of the equation. And we all know how tough it is to maintain consistency with how busy we are with our lives. That's why investing in a reliable fish feeder is important if you want to keep your fish well fed all the time. I've dealt with every fish feeder on the market, and hands down, the Texas Hunter fish feeder has been the most reliable and best functioning one. They're extremely versatile, from the adjustable legs to the adjustable top spinner plate to accommodate a wide range of size of pellets. One feeder is fine to have for a 1 acre, maybe 2 acre pond. Even for a 2 acre pond, I'd recommend getting a second one just to spread out your fish. You don't want to be congregating all of your fish around a single feeder. If you have a bigger pond, it can increase the transmission of fish parasites and diseases. And like I said earlier, you want to be dispensing 4 pounds of fish food per acre per day. I usually recommend at least 1 feeder for every 2 acres. If you're dispensing more than 8 pounds of food from a single feeder per day, it will drain the batteries even with a solar charger on it. You can place them on docks, which make great spots for them, but I like to place them near habitat enhancement areas or brush piles so the bluegill can go up and grab a pellet and retreat back to safety. Most of the time I'll put the feeders out first, then install the habitat right in front of that feeder, creating a bluegill buffet. Feeding your fish is only half the battle. You can provide the best buffet in the world, but if your bait fish have nowhere to hide, your bass will wipe out your investment in a single season. To keep the factory running, you need to master the architecture of the bluegill buffet. Habitat is the backbone of a productive fishery. It is paramount to have at least 20% coverage of high density habitat. If there's less than that, the bait fish don't have enough hidey holes and they are vulnerable to predation, leaving you with a very low forage density for your bass. Not good. On the other hand, if you have too many hidey holes from dense stands of aquatic vegetation, your bass won't be able to find and capture prey efficiently. So for proper predator-prey dynamics, the sweet spot is 20% coverage. What does 20% mean actually? So like everything in pond management, there's a bit of nuance to the 20% coverage threshold. For instance, what's the point of placing habitat in dead water? Going back to our discussion about the thermocline, it would be pointless to place habitat beneath the thermocline because it's void of oxygen. So when I say 20% coverage, I'm talking about livable water, which is normally between 6 and 8 feet deep or less. This is also the littoral zone. In most cases, when giving recommendations on how much habitat to add to a client's pond, I'll take the bathymetric map and determine how many acres of livable water they have and calculate 20% of that. But if you have bottom-diffused aeration, or if your pond is only about 8 feet deep, 100% of your pond is livable water. If that's the case, you'll just take 20% of your total surface area. What type of habitat is best, natural or artificial? The answer is both. Diversity is key. The best natural habitat is the cedar tree. It has tons of, tiny flexible twigs with lots of interstitial spaces for small fish to hide in. It becomes a, smorgasbord almost instantly because periphyton will immediately begin to accumulate on the entire tree. Periphyton is a conglomerate of beneficial microbes, algae, and nitrogen-fixing bacteria that macroinvertebrates and insects feed on, which attracts bluegill and other small fish. The only artificial habitat that closely resembles a cedar tree is the ugly tree. The adaptability of the ugly trees are incredible. You can place them in deep water or break them into smaller pieces for shallower placement. You can fluff out every single limb for, excellent high-density habitat, or leave them unfluffed for bass hangouts and ambush points. Oh, and did I mention that they last forever? They are engineered to withstand the elements of nature, providing long-term benefits not only for the fish, but also for the health of your pond's aquatic ecosystem. Because the more ugly trees in your pond, the more surface area for beneficial nitrogen-fixing microbes to cling to, which will ultimately improve the water quality of your pond as well. So to get the full effect of the ugly trees, install 8 to 10 bundles per littoral acre. Each bundle is made up of 8 ugly trees, but I like to put 3 fluffed uglies tightly together for, small bait fish, and place 5 unfluffed ones in a circle around the 3 fluffed ones for, excellent ambush points for the bass. Creating a habitat mosaic that consists of artificial and natural habitat with a complement of aquatic vegetation will provide your fish with a diversity of food, shelter, and good water quality. Now, if the aquatic vegetation gets out of control on occasion, I have a playlist called Pond Weed Problems where I discuss control methods for a variety of pond pests. Click on the playlist in the upper right, I think that's the right-hand corner, to check that out. Or if you're looking to add another fish species, click up there, I think, to watch the Species Spotlight series where I go into depth on how to manage various fish species. Now remember, you don't need a PhD or a master's degree to master the science of pondology. It's your pond, so don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do with it. You can create your dream pond. You can be your own biologist.